The stagecoach jolted to a stop outside the Mercantile in Murphy's, California, and Delilah Kimball felt the familiar knot of shame tighten in her stomach as the driver opened the door with a look of profound relief. She stepped down onto the dusty Main Street in the spring of 1872, her fourth return in as many months, and she could already see the whispers starting among the townsfolk who recognized her. The matchmaker's office loomed across the street like a courthouse where she had been tried and found wanting, over and over again, for the singular crime of possessing opinions and the audacity to voice them. Mrs. Weatherby, the matchmaker, stood on the porch with her arms crossed, her expression somewhere between exasperation and resignation. Delilah smoothed down her travel-worn dress and lifted her chin, refusing to let the humiliation bend her spine. She was 22 years old, educated beyond what most considered proper for a woman, and cursed with a tongue that refused to stay silent when she witnessed foolishness or injustice. "Miss Kimball," Mrs. Weatherby said, her voice carrying the weight of disappointed expectations. "Mr. Peterson has already sent word ahead. I assume you know what he said." "That I questioned his business practices too openly," Delilah replied, her voice steady despite the burning in her chest. "Or that I suggested his treatment of his hired hands was bordering on cruel. Perhaps it was when I corrected him about the actual provisions of the Homestead Act in front of his associates." Mrs. Weatherby's lips pressed into a thin line. "All of the above, I believe. He was quite specific in his letter. He used the phrase obstinate and unsuitable for polite society no less than 3 times. "How creative of him," Delilah said, unable to keep the edge from her voice. "Did he mention that he was planning to swindle those farmers out of their water rights? Or that he laughed when I suggested basic human decency might be good for his soul?" "This is precisely the problem," Mrs. Weatherby sighed, gesturing for Delilah to follow her inside. "You are an intelligent, capable young woman from a good family. Your father's printing business provided you with education and means. But intelligence in a woman must be tempered with discretion, my dear. Men do not want their errors pointed out, especially not in front of others." Delilah followed her into the office, the familiar surroundings feeling more like a prison with each return. The walls were covered with daguerreotypes of successful matches, happy couples frozen in time, their secrets and compromises hidden behind stiff poses and formal attire. She wondered how many of those women had learned to bite their tongues until they tasted blood. "I have tried," Delilah said quietly, sinking into the chair across from Mrs. Weatherby's desk. "With Mr. Peterson, I truly tried. For 3 weeks I smiled and nodded. I served tea and laughed at jokes that were not funny. But when I saw him berating that young man who works in his stables, calling him worthless over a simple mistake, I could not stay silent. And when he announced his plan to buy up the water rights from farmers who did not understand what they were signing away, I could not pretend I had not heard." Mrs. Weatherby softened slightly, her expression shifting from frustration to something approaching sympathy. "I know your heart is good, Delilah, but the world is not kind to women who challenge men, especially not out here. You need to find a way to make peace with that, or you will find yourself without prospects at all." "Perhaps that would be preferable," Delilah said, though the words felt hollow. She had nowhere else to go. Her father had died 2 years ago, and his printing business had been sold to pay his debts. Her mother had passed when she was a child. She had no siblings, no inheritance, and no means to support herself beyond marriage or the few respectable positions available to unmarried women, none of which were available in Murphy's. "Do not say such things," Mrs. Weatherby said firmly. "I have one more possibility, though I warn you, It is not what you are accustomed to. A rancher named Nathan Hawthorne has written requesting a wife. He is 30 years old, owns a substantial property about 15 miles north of here, and by all accounts is a man of good character. However, he is rather blunt in his requirements. How unusual, Delilah said with a trace of bitterness. Let me guess. He wants someone quiet, obedient, and decorative. Mrs. Weatherby pulled out a letter, unfolding it with careful fingers. Actually, his letter is rather different from most. Would you like to hear it? Delilah nodded, curiosity overriding her cynicism. Mrs. Weatherby adjusted her spectacles and read aloud. Mrs. Weatherby, I am in need of a wife. I have tried to make do without one, but running a ranch while managing everything else has proven more difficult than my pride wanted to admit. I do not need someone who will simply agree with everything I say. In fact, I would prefer someone with sense enough to speak up when I am about to make a mistake. I have seen too many men suffer because their wives were too scared or too trained to tell them the truth. I need a partner, not an ornament. If you have someone who fits that description, I would be grateful for an introduction. I do not care about her accomplishments in needlework or her ability to faint gracefully. I care whether she has a working mind and the courage to use it. Respectfully, Nathan Hawthorne. Delilah sat in stunned silence, certain she had misheard. He wrote that, truly. Every word, Mrs. Weatherby said, setting the letter down. I have been holding on to this for 2 weeks, unsure who to match him with. Most of the young women I work with would not know what to make of such a request. But you, Miss Kimball, might be exactly what he needs, or you might drive each other to distraction within a week. It is difficult to say. Why would he want such a thing? Delilah asked, her mind racing. Most men seem to prefer women who never contradict them. I cannot answer that, Mrs. Weatherby replied, but I can arrange for you to meet him if you are willing. He plans to come into town tomorrow for supplies. I could introduce you, and you could speak with him yourself. No commitments, just a conversation. Delilah's heart hammered against her ribs. It seemed too good to be true, like a trap waiting to spring shut. And yet, what choice did she have? Return to another man who would send her back within weeks, attempt to find work that did not exist. She thought of her father, who had encouraged her reading and her questions, who had taught her to think critically and speak honestly. He would not have wanted her to become a silent shadow of herself. Yes, she said finally, I will meet him. That night, Delilah stayed in the boarding house Mrs. Weatherby kept for women between placements. She shared a room with 2 other young women, both of whom seemed perfectly content with their upcoming matches. They chattered about their future husbands with a mixture of nervousness and resignation, discussing household management and child rearing as if they were preparing for examinations rather than marriages. Delilah lay awake long after the others had fallen asleep, staring at the ceiling and wondering what kind of man would actually want a woman who spoke her mind. Was Nathan Hawthorne genuine, or was this some kind of test? Perhaps he wanted someone outspoken so he could have the satisfaction of breaking that spirit, of proving he could tame what others could not. The thought made her stomach turn, but she forced herself to consider it. She had learned the hard way that people were not always what they seemed, that kind words could hide cruel intentions. But she had also learned that cynicism could become its own prison. If she refused to hope, refused to believe that somewhere there might be someone who valued honesty over compliance, then she was already defeated. Morning came too quickly and too slowly at once. Delilah dressed with care, choosing her most practical dress, a deep blue cotton that had seen better days but was clean and well mended. She refused to dress like she was going to an audition, refused to present herself as anything other than what she was. If Nathan Hawthorne was serious about wanting truth, then he would get it from the very beginning. Mrs. Weatherby met her downstairs, looking her over with an assessing eye. "You might have chosen something more flattering," she observed. "I might have," Delilah agreed, "but this is who I am. If he wants someone different, better he knows now." Mrs. Weatherby shook her head but did not argue. They walked together to the Mercantile, where Nathan Hawthorne had arranged to meet them at 10 o'clock. The morning sun was already warm, promising a hot afternoon. Murphy's was coming alive around them, miners heading up to the claims in the hills, merchants opening their shops, children running errands for their families. It was a town built on gold fever and sustained by stubborn hope, much like the people who inhabited it. Nathan Hawthorne was waiting outside the Mercantile, and Delilah spotted him immediately. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that spoke of hard physical labor. His face was weathered from sun and wind, with lines around his eyes that suggested he spent a lot of time squinting at distant horizons. He wore working clothes, clean but practical, and his hat was pushed back slightly, revealing dark hair that needed a trim. He was not handsome in the conventional sense, but there was something solid and genuine about him that made her breath catch. He straightened when he saw them approaching, and Delilah caught the flash of nervousness in his eyes before he schooled his expression into something more neutral. So he was uncertain, too. That small revelation steadied her. "Mr. Hawthorne," Mrs. Weatherby said warmly. "May I introduce Miss Delilah Kimball? Miss Kimball, this is Mr. Nathan Hawthorne." "Miss Kimball," Nathan said, removing his hat and inclining his head. His voice was deep and measured, with a slight rasp that suggested he did not spend much time in idle conversation. "It is a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Hawthorne," Delilah replied, meeting his gaze directly. His eyes were a striking gray, clear and assessing. She refused to look away first. Mrs. Weatherby glanced between them, seeming satisfied with whatever she saw. "I will leave you two to speak. Mr. Hawthorne, you may bring Miss Kimball back to my office when you are finished." "Thank you, madam," Nathan said. He turned his attention back to Delilah, studying her with an intensity that would have been rude in different circumstances. "Would you walk with me? There is a place down by the creek where we could talk without the whole town listening." "That would be fine," Delilah said. She fell into step beside him as they made their way through town, acutely aware of the curious glances following them. Nathan did not seem to notice or care, his long strides eating up the distance with purpose. They walked in silence until they reached the creek that ran along the eastern edge of town, swollen with snowmelt from the Sierra Nevada mountains. Nathan found a spot beneath a large oak tree where the ground was relatively flat, and the sound of the water provided some privacy. "I imagine Mrs. Weatherby told you about my letter," Nathan said, turning to face her. He still held his hat in his hands, turning it slowly. "And I imagine you have questions about why I would write such a thing." "Several," Delilah admitted. "It is not the sort of request most men make." "No," Nathan agreed. "But I am not most men, and I have learned some hard lessons about what happens when people do not speak honestly with each other." He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "My father built the ranch I now run. He was a good man in many ways, hard-working and fair to his employees. But he was also stubborn and convinced of his own rightness in all things. My mother knew better than to contradict him, had been raised to believe that a wife's role was to support her husband without question. So when he made decisions that were clearly wrong, when he planned things that would hurt the ranch or the people who depended on him, she said nothing." Nathan's jaw tightened, and Delilah could see the old pain etched in the lines of his face. "There was a winter about 10 years ago, brutal cold and snow. My father decided to keep the cattle in the high pasture longer than he should have, convinced the weather would hold. My mother knew it was a mistake, had grown up in these mountains and understood the signs. But she did not say anything, and my father drove those cattle up just as the worst blizzard in 20 years came through. We lost more than half the herd, and 3 men died trying to bring them back down. Delilah drew in a sharp breath. I am sorry. My mother blamed herself, Nathan continued, his voice rough. Said she should have spoken up, should have insisted he listen. She got sick that winter, something in her lungs, and she never really recovered. She died the following spring, and with her last words she made me promise something. She said to find a woman who would not stay silent when silence could do harm, who valued truth more than peace. She said a real partnership required 2 voices, not just one. He looked directly at Delilah, and she saw the earnestness in his expression, the vulnerability beneath the weathered exterior. So when Mrs. Weatherby asked me what I wanted in a wife, I told her the truth. I need someone who will tell me when I am being a fool, who will argue with me if I am wrong, who has enough spine to stand up for what is right even if it is uncomfortable. I have no interest in a woman who will just smile and nod while I make mistakes that could cost lives or livelihoods. Delilah felt something tight in her chest begin to loosen. I have been returned 4 times, she said quietly. 4 different men who found me unsuitable because I could not stay silent when I saw something wrong. The last one called me obstinate and unsuitable for polite society because I objected to him cheating farmers and mistreating his employees. Then he was a fool, Nathan said flatly, and he did not deserve you. Most people would say I need to learn my place, Delilah replied, watching him carefully, that a woman should defer to her husband in all things. Most people are wrong about a lot of things, Nathan said. I have run my ranch for 8 years now since my father passed. I have made good decisions and bad ones, and the best decisions were usually the ones where I listened to people who knew more than I did. I do not need a wife who will worship me. I need one who will work with me, who will tell me the truth even when it is hard to hear. If that is something you think you could do, then I would like to court you properly and see if we suit. Delilah stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. You are serious. Completely, Nathan said. I know this is sudden. I know you have no reason to trust me after what you have been through. But I am asking you to give me a chance to prove I mean what I say. Spend time with me, ask me anything you want, and make your own judgment. What if we disagree about something important? Delilah asked. What if I speak up, and you find it is not what you actually wanted after all? Then we will work it out like reasonable people, Nathan replied. I am not saying we will never argue or that I will always change my mind just because you disagree. But I will listen, truly listen, and consider what you have to say. And I expect the same from you. A partnership means both people have a voice, not just one. Delilah took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on her. Everything she had been through, all the rejection and shame, had led to this moment. She could walk away, could tell Mrs. Weatherby to find her someone safer, someone more predictable. But safety had not served her well so far, and predictability had only meant more heartbreak. I would like to try, she said finally. But I need you to understand something. I am not going to pretend to be someone I am not. I will not test you with false silence, waiting to see if you really mean what you say. If I see something that concerns me, I will speak up. If I disagree with you, I will say so. And if at any point you find that too difficult, I need you to be honest with me rather than building resentment. Agreed, Nathan said, and for the first time, a smile touched his lips. It transformed his face, softening the hard lines and revealing warmth beneath the weathered exterior. I appreciate the honesty. Should we start with dinner tonight? There is a restaurant in town that serves decent food, and we could talk more about what each of us is looking for." "That would be acceptable," Delilah said, and found herself smiling back despite her lingering caution. They walked back to town together, the conversation flowing more easily now that the initial tension had broken. Nathan told her about his ranch, about the cattle and horses he raised, about the 5 men who worked for him, and the challenges of maintaining a profitable operation in territory that could be harsh and unforgiving. Delilah told him about her father's printing business, about growing up surrounded by books and newspapers, about her education and the frustration of being told her intelligence was a liability rather than an asset. "That is a waste," Nathan said firmly when she finished. "Someone who can read and write well, who understands business, who can think critically about problems. That is valuable, regardless of whether they are male or female. I could use someone like that helping run the ranch accounts, managing correspondence with buyers, keeping track of inventory and supplies. My current system is barely organized chaos." "You would trust me with that?" Delilah asked, surprised. "If you prove capable, yes," Nathan said. "I am not interested in hiring a housekeeper who happens to share my bed. I want a true partner, someone who can handle things when I am out with the cattle or dealing with other aspects of the ranch. That requires trust and responsibility on both sides." They reached Mrs. Weatherby's office, and Nathan turned to face her, his expression serious again. "I will come by at 6 o'clock if that suits you." "I will be ready," Delilah promised. She watched him walk away, his long strides carrying him down the street toward the livery where he had apparently stabled his horse. Only when he was out of sight did she turn and go inside, where Mrs. Weatherby was waiting with barely concealed curiosity. "Well?" the matchmaker asked. "We are having dinner tonight," Delilah said, still processing everything that had happened. "He seems genuine, but I suppose time will tell." "He has a good reputation," Mrs. Weatherby offered. "People speak well of him, say he is fair and honest in his dealings." "But you are right to be cautious, my dear. Take your time and be certain." Delilah spent the afternoon in a state of nervous energy, alternating between hope and skepticism. She borrowed a better dress from Mrs. Weatherby's collection of clothing left behind by previous clients, a dark green silk that fit well enough with a few quick adjustments. She arranged her dark hair carefully, pinning it up in a style that was elegant but not overly fussy. Looking at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the woman staring back. Not because she looked different, but because, for the first time in months, there was hope in her eyes. Nathan arrived precisely at 6 o'clock, cleaned up and wearing clothes that were clearly his best, though still practical. He offered his arm, and Delilah took it, feeling the solid strength beneath the fabric of his coat. They walked to the restaurant, a small establishment run by a French couple who had come to California during the gold rush and stayed to feed the miners who remained. The food was indeed good, and the conversation flowed easily. Nathan asked about her father's business, about what she had learned and what she had enjoyed most. Delilah found herself relaxing as she talked about setting type, about the satisfaction of seeing words arranged on a page, about the power of information to change minds and influence events. "My father believed that an informed populace was essential to democracy," she said, warming to the subject. "He printed newspapers, yes, but also pamphlets about workers' rights, about the importance of education, about the injustices done to the Chinese laborers and the native peoples. He made enemies doing it, but he believed it was worth the cost." "He sounds like a man of principle," Nathan said, his respect evident. "The world needs more of those." "What about you?" Delilah asked. "You mentioned listening to people who know more than you do." Does that include your ranch hands? I know many employers do not value the opinions of those who work for them. Nathan nodded approvingly, as if she had asked exactly the right question. It does. 3 of my men have been working cattle longer than I have been alive. They know things about animal behavior, about reading weather patterns, about managing grazing land that I am still learning. I would be a fool not to listen to them. And yes, before you ask, I pay them fair wages and make sure they have decent housing and food. A man cannot do his best work if he is worried about survival. What about the other injustices? Delilah pressed, needing to know where he stood. The way the native peoples have been treated, the violence against the Chinese communities, the exploitation of workers who have no recourse. Nathan's expression grew troubled. I cannot claim to have solutions to all of those problems, but I can control how I conduct myself and my business. I do not participate in vigilante violence. I do not cheat people just because the law might let me get away with it, and I speak up when I see wrong being done, even if it makes me unpopular. It is not enough, I know that, but it is what I can do. That is more than most, Delilah said quietly. Most people do not even try. They talked until the restaurant began to empty, until the proprietor started giving them pointed looks about closing time. Nathan walked her back to the boarding house, the evening air cool and pleasant after the warmth of the day. May I see you again tomorrow? Nathan asked as they reached the door. I need to head back to the ranch in the afternoon, but I could call on you in the morning. Yes, Delilah said, surprised by how much she wanted to say yes. I would like that. Nathan smiled, that same transformation of his features that made her heart skip. Good night, Miss Kimball. I will see you tomorrow. Good night, Mr. Hawthorne. Delilah watched him walk away before going inside where Mrs. Weatherby was waiting with tea and questions. They talked late into the night, Delilah recounting the conversation and her impressions, while Mrs. Weatherby listened with knowing nods. He seems quite taken with you, the matchmaker observed. And unless I miss my guess, the feeling is mutual. It is too soon to know, Delilah protested, but the warmth in her cheeks gave her away. Perhaps, Mrs. Weatherby said with a smile. But sometimes when the right people meet at the right time, things move quickly. Just promise me you will be careful with your heart, dear. You have been hurt enough already. I will, Delilah promised, though she suspected it might already be too late for careful. The next morning brought another walk with Nathan, this time up into the foothills where they could see the whole valley spread out below them. The hills were green from winter rains, dotted with wildflowers and oak trees. Nathan pointed out landmarks, showing her where his property began, describing the layout of the ranch and his hopes for its future. I want to build something lasting, he said as they sat on a rocky outcrop looking out over the landscape. Something that can support a family, provide employment for good people, and endure beyond my lifetime. But I cannot do it alone. I have realized that over the past few years. A ranch this size needs more than one person managing it, especially if it is going to grow. How large is it now? Delilah asked. About 800 acres of deeded land, plus grazing rights on another 2,000 acres of public land, Nathan replied. I run about 300 head of cattle and 20 horses. It is enough to make a decent living, but it could be more with better management and expansion. And you want a wife to help with that expansion, Delilah said, testing the waters. I want a partner, Nathan corrected gently. Someone who can share the load, contribute ideas, help make decisions. Yes, I hope for children eventually if we are blessed with them. But even beyond that, I need someone who can stand beside me, not just behind me. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching a hawk circle overhead. Delilah felt something settling in her chest, a sense of rightness that she had never experienced with any of the other men she had been matched with. Nathan did not try to fill every silence with words, did not seem to need constant validation or attention. He was simply present, solid and real beside her. "I should tell you," Delilah said finally, "that I have a temper. When I see injustice or cruelty, I do not always respond with calm reason. I get angry, and that anger shows in my voice and my words. Some men find that frightening or unseemly." "Some men are intimidated by passion," Nathan replied. "I am not one of them. As long as the anger is directed at problems and not at people trying to solve them, I see no issue with it. Lord knows I have lost my temper more than once when dealing with dishonest cattle buyers or bureaucrats who care more about regulations than reason." "What if we disagree about how to handle something?" Delilah asked. "What if my passion for one approach conflicts with your judgment?" "Then we argue it out until we find a solution we can both live with," Nathan said simply. "Or we compromise, or one of us convinces the other, but we do it together with respect for each other's perspective. That is what partnership means." He turned to look at her, his gray eyes serious. "I know I am asking a lot, Delilah. I am asking you to trust me after you have been given every reason not to trust men who make promises. I am asking you to consider marrying someone you have known for less than 2 days. But I feel certain, more certain than I have felt about anything in a long time, that we could build something good together, something true and lasting." Delilah's heart hammered in her chest. Every rational part of her brain screamed caution, urged her to slow down, to take more time. But there was another part, deeper and more instinctive, that recognized something essential in Nathan Hawthorne. Here was a man who valued the very things that had made her unsuitable to everyone else. Here was someone who saw her intelligence and her passion not as flaws to be corrected but as strengths to be valued. "I feel it too," she admitted quietly, "and it terrifies me." "Good," Nathan said with a slight smile. "If it did not terrify you at least a little, I would worry about your judgment." They talked for another hour before Nathan reluctantly said he needed to return to the ranch. They made plans for him to come back to town in 3 days, and Nathan promised to write in the meantime. When they parted at the boarding house, he took her hand briefly, his touch warm and steady. "Think about what I have said," he told her, "and if you have questions or concerns, write them down. We will discuss everything when I return." "I will," Delilah promised. The next 3 days passed in a strange suspension of time, simultaneously crawling and racing. Delilah found herself thinking about Nathan constantly, analyzing their conversations, looking for warning signs or red flags and finding none. She talked with Mrs. Weatherby, asking pointed questions about Nathan's reputation and history. Everything she learned supported what he had told her. He was known as fair but firm, honest in his dealings, and respectful to everyone regardless of their station. Nathan's letter arrived on the 2nd day, and Delilah read it 3 times, examining every word for hidden meanings or false notes. He wrote about his day, about a foal being born and a fence that needed mending, about his cook threatening to quit if the hands did not stop tracking mud through the kitchen. But he also wrote about missing their conversations, about looking forward to seeing her again, about hoping she was settling well and not having second thoughts. Delilah wrote back immediately, surprising herself with how easily the words flowed. She told him about helping Mrs. Weatherby with correspondence, about walking through town and seeing it with new eyes now that she might actually have a future here, about her nervousness and her hope existing in equal measure. When Nathan returned to town 3 days later, Delilah felt her heart lift at the sight of him riding down the main street. He had cleaned up before coming into town, but there was dust on his boots, and his face bore the marks of hard work under the sun. He dismounted in front of the boarding house and swept off his hat, his smile broad and genuine. "Miss Kimball," he said, "I hope I am not too early." "Right on time," Delilah replied, stepping out to meet him. "Should we walk?" They fell into step together naturally, as if they had been doing this for years rather than days. Nathan told her about the new foal, describing its uncertain legs and curious nature with obvious affection. Delilah found herself enchanted by this glimpse of softness beneath his practical exterior. "I have been thinking about what you said," Delilah told him as they reached the creek again, returning to the spot where they had first talked. "About partnership and honesty and building something together." "And?" Nathan asked, tension evident in his shoulders despite his casual tone. "I want to try," Delilah said, the words coming out in a rush. "I want to believe that what you are offering is real, that there is a man who actually values what everyone else has found objectionable in me. But I am scared, Nathan. I am scared of being wrong again, of discovering too late that the reality does not match the promise." Nathan moved closer, not touching her but near enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. "I am scared too," he admitted. "Scared of failing you, of not living up to what I have promised. But I think the fear is worth facing if the alternative is never trying at all." "What do you propose?" Delilah asked. "Come to the ranch," Nathan said. "Stay for a week, 2 weeks if you are comfortable with it. Mrs. Weatherby can come as chaperone if that makes you more comfortable. See how I run things, meet my men, look at the accounts and the property. Ask difficult questions and watch how I respond. Put me to the test, Delilah. See if I am what I claim to be." It was a bold offer, one that could expose any pretense or deception, which was precisely why Delilah found herself nodding before she could overthink it. "All right. Yes, I will come." Nathan's relief was palpable. "Thank you, I will make arrangements, make sure there is proper accommodation." "When can you be ready?" "Give me 2 days to prepare," Delilah said. "I will need to discuss it with Mrs. Weatherby and make sure everything is proper." "Of course," Nathan agreed. "I will come for you the day after tomorrow, early morning. The ride takes about 3 hours." They spent the rest of the afternoon making plans, discussing practical details, and Delilah felt some of her fear transmuting into excitement. This was action, forward movement, a chance to see beyond words into reality. Mrs. Weatherby was initially hesitant about the arrangement but ultimately agreed that it was sensible for Delilah to see the ranch and Nathan's life before making any permanent commitments. She arranged for one of her assistants, a widow named Mrs. Grant, to accompany Delilah as chaperone. The morning of departure dawned clear and bright, the California sky an endless blue dome overhead. Nathan arrived with a wagon rather than on horseback, explaining that it would be more comfortable for the ladies and would allow them to bring adequate luggage. Mrs. Grant settled into the back with their bags while Delilah took the seat beside Nathan. As they left Murphy's behind, rolling through the foothills with the mountains rising in the distance, Delilah felt a strange sense of leaving one life behind and moving toward another. The landscape was beautiful in its rugged way, golden grass and dark green oaks punctuated by granite outcroppings and seasonal creeks. Nathan pointed out landmarks and told stories about the region, his love for this land evident in every word. They stopped once to rest the horses and eat lunch by a small creek. Mrs. Grant dozed in the shade while Nathan and Delilah sat together on a fallen log, their shoulders nearly touching. "Nervous?" Nathan asked quietly. "Yes," Delilah admitted, "but also excited. Is that strange?" "Not at all," Nathan replied. "I feel the same way. I want you to like the ranch, to see possibilities there. But I also know that if this does not feel right to you, then it is better to know now." "Have you had many women visit?" Delilah asked, immediately regretting the question. But Nathan did not seem offended. "No," he said simply. "There was a woman a few years back, someone I courted for a while, but she wanted city life, wanted culture and society and things I could not provide out here. We parted amicably, but it taught me that I needed to be clear about what I could offer and what I needed in return. Honesty from the start saves heartbreak later." "That seems wise," Delilah said. They reached the ranch in early afternoon, and Delilah's first impression was of order and care. The main house was substantial, built of wood with a wide porch that wrapped around two sides. It was not fancy, but it was well maintained and welcoming. Beyond it stood a large barn, several outbuildings, and a bunkhouse for the hands. Corrals held horses and cattle, and everything spoke of a working ranch run with attention and pride. Nathan helped both women down from the wagon, and Delilah found herself studying everything with keen interest. The ranch hands who came to greet them were polite and respectful, calling Nathan by his first name with easy familiarity. That informality spoke well of him, suggesting he did not stand on ceremony or demand subservience from those who worked for him. "Welcome to my home," Nathan said, gesturing toward the house. "Let me show you inside." The interior was clean but clearly the domain of someone who lived alone and focused on function over decoration. The furniture was solid and comfortable, the kitchen well equipped but lacking the touches that marked a woman's presence. Nathan showed them to the guest rooms, 2 bedrooms side by side with a shared sitting area between them. "I hope these will be comfortable," he said. "My cook, Henry, will prepare meals, and if you need anything at all, please just ask." Mrs. Grant immediately set about unpacking and arranging their things with brisk efficiency, clearly intending to give Nathan and Delilah space to talk. Nathan led Delilah back downstairs and out to the porch where they could sit and watch the activity of the ranch. "What do you think so far?" Nathan asked. "It is impressive," Delilah said honestly. "Everything seems well run and organized. Your men seem to respect you." "I try to treat them fairly," Nathan said. "They work hard and they deserve to be compensated and respected for that work. I have seen too many ranchers who view their hands as disposable, and it shows in the quality of the work and the constant turnover." Over the next few days, Delilah immersed herself in understanding the ranch. Nathan was true to his word, holding nothing back. He showed her the account books, explaining his system of tracking expenses and income, admitting freely where his organization fell short. Delilah found herself making suggestions almost unconsciously, pointing out ways to streamline the record-keeping and make patterns more visible. "This is exactly what I need," Nathan said with obvious satisfaction, as she sketched out a new organizational structure. "Someone who can see what I am missing." He took her out to see the cattle, explaining his breeding program and his approach to managing the herd. They rode through the property on gentle horses, and Nathan pointed out the boundaries and the different grazing areas. Delilah had never spent much time on horseback, but she found she enjoyed it, enjoyed the freedom and the perspective it provided. The ranch hands warmed to her quickly, especially when she did not stand on ceremony or treat them as inferior. She learned their names, asked about their backgrounds, and listened with genuine interest to their stories. Most were younger sons with no inheritance, men who had come west looking for opportunity and found it in hard work and honest wages. One evening after dinner, one of the older hands named Charlie approached her on the porch where she sat watching the sunset. He was perhaps 60 years old, weathered and lean, with keen eyes that missed nothing. "Miss Kimball," he said, hat in hand, "I hope I am not intruding. Not at all, Delilah assured him. Please sit. Charlie settled into a chair, taking his time as if choosing his words carefully. I wanted to say something, if you will hear it. I have worked for Nathan for 6 years now, worked for his father before him. I have seen a lot of men running ranches, some good, some bad, most somewhere in between. Nathan is one of the good ones. He treats people right, keeps his word, and does not ask anything of his men that he would not do himself. I have seen that, Delilah said gently, understanding that Charlie had something more to say. What I want you to know, Charlie continued, is that he needs someone. Not just for the practical help, though that is true enough, but he has been alone too long, carries too much on his shoulders. His mother's death hit him hard, made him question everything about how relationships should work. When he told me he was looking for a wife who would speak her mind, I thought he was being foolish. But now that I have met you, seen how you are, I think maybe he knew what he needed after all. Delilah felt unexpected emotion tighten her throat. That is kind of you to say. Not kind, just true, Charlie said. You are good for him. I can see it already the way he is around you, lighter somehow, like a weight has been lifted. I hope you will stay, miss. I think you could make each other happy. After Charlie left, Delilah sat alone with her thoughts, watching the last light fade from the sky. Everything she had seen and experienced over the past days supported Nathan's claims. He was exactly what he appeared to be. Honest, hardworking, fair, and genuinely interested in building a partnership rather than acquiring a servant or ornament. The question was whether she was brave enough to trust it, to step forward into this new life, despite all the times she had been hurt before. Nathan found her there as full darkness fell, settling into the chair Charlie had vacated. Penny for your thoughts. Charlie spoke to me earlier, Delilah said. He seems to think highly of you. He is a good man, Nathan replied. Known him most of my life. He worked for my father and stayed on after, helped me learn how to really run this place. What did he say? That you need someone, Delilah said quietly. That you carry too much alone. Nathan was silent for a long moment. He is not wrong. I have been managing, but managing is not the same as thriving. I want to build something bigger, something better. But more than that, I want to share my life with someone. I want conversation and companionship and partnership. I want someone to care about, someone who cares about me in return. I want a family eventually if we are blessed with children. I want a home, not just a house. He turned to look at her, his face barely visible in the darkness. I know it has only been a week since we met. I know by all reasonable standards this is too fast. But I am certain, Delilah, certain in a way I have never been before. You are everything I hoped to find and more than I had any right to expect. If you will have me, I would like to ask you properly to marry me. Delilah's breath caught. This was the moment, the point of decision that would shape the rest of her life. She could retreat into caution, insist on more time, protect herself from potential hurt. Or she could step forward into possibility, into the life Nathan was offering, into the partnership she had never dared to believe she could find. Yes, she said, and felt the words settle into her bones with absolute rightness. Yes, Nathan, I will marry you. She heard his breath release in a shaky exhale, felt him reach for her hand in the darkness. His fingers were warm and calloused, strong and gentle at once. You have made me very happy, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I promise you, Delilah, I will spend the rest of my life trying to deserve that yes. Just be what you have shown me this week, Delilah said. Honest and fair and open to truth. That is all I ask. They sat together in the darkness, hands clasped, while the night deepened around them and the stars emerged overhead. Delilah felt a peace settle over her that she had not experienced since her father's death, a sense of finally coming home after a long and difficult journey. The next days were a flurry of activity and planning. Mrs. Grant rode back to town to inform Mrs. Weatherby of the engagement, while Delilah and Nathan worked out the practical details of their life together. They decided on a short engagement, just long enough to arrange a proper wedding and for Delilah to settle her few affairs in town. Nathan took her to the account books again, this time explaining everything in detail and asking for her input on future planning. Delilah found herself energized by the challenge, by the opportunity to use her mind in practical ways. She reorganized the filing system, created new tracking methods, and identified several areas where expenses could be reduced without sacrificing quality. "You are worth your weight in gold," Nathan said with obvious admiration as she finished explaining a new inventory system. "I have been wasting time and money with my old approach. This is so much clearer." "It is what my father taught me," Delilah said, pleased by his reaction. "Numbers tell stories if you know how to read them." They also talked about the future, about what they each wanted from their marriage and their life together. Nathan was clear that he hoped for children, but understood that such things were not guaranteed. Delilah admitted her own desire for family, for the chance to create something her parents had modeled before her mother's early death cut that short. "I want our children to grow up knowing they can speak their minds," Delilah said firmly. "Boys and girls both. I want them educated and encouraged to think critically, to question things that do not make sense, to stand up for what is right." "Agreed," Nathan said without hesitation. "Though I suspect we will have our hands full with children who inherit your stubbornness and my tendency to dig in when I think I am right." "They will keep us humble," Delilah replied with a smile. The wedding was arranged for 3 weeks later, giving time for preparations, but not so long that it became an ordeal. Delilah returned to town with Nathan and Mrs. Grant, staying at the boarding house while final arrangements were made. Mrs. Weatherby was delighted with the match, claiming she had known from the start that they would suit each other perfectly. "You just needed someone who valued what you are rather than trying to change you into something else," the matchmaker said sagely. "I knew Nathan was special when I read his letter. Men like him are rare, my dear. You are very fortunate." "I know," Delilah said quietly, "and I do not intend to take that for granted." The wedding was small but meaningful, held in the modest church in Murphy's with Mrs. Weatherby and the ranch hands in attendance, along with a scattering of townspeople who had come to know and respect Nathan. Delilah wore a simple but elegant dress in cream silk, altered to fit her by one of the women in town who took in sewing. Nathan wore his best suit, cleaned and pressed, his dark hair neatly trimmed and his face shaved smooth. When they exchanged vows, Delilah felt the weight and significance of the promises they were making. To love and honor, to support and respect, to build a life together based on truth and partnership. Nathan's hands were steady as he slipped the gold ring onto her finger, his gray eyes bright with emotion. "I will spend every day trying to deserve you," he murmured as the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife. "Just love me," Delilah whispered back. "That is all I need." Their kiss was chaste and brief, appropriate for the setting, but Delilah felt the promise in it, the depth of feeling that Nathan was holding in check for public propriety. There would be time later for everything else, for the intimacy and passion that was building between them. The reception was held at the restaurant where they had eaten on their first evening together, and the French proprietor had outdone himself with the food and wine. Toasts were made, stories were told, and Delilah found herself laughing more than she had in years. The ranch hands treated her with easy affection now, welcoming her as part of their extended family. Charlie approached her during the party, raising his glass in a private toast. "To the boss's wife," he said with a warm smile. "May you keep him honest and happy for many years to come." "I will certainly try," Delilah replied, touching her glass to his. As the sun began to set, Nathan collected Delilah and they made their escape in the wagon, heading back to the ranch that was now her home. Mrs. Grant had returned earlier with their belongings, ensuring that everything was ready for their arrival. The ride through the twilight was peaceful, and Delilah leaned against Nathan's shoulder, feeling contentment settle into her bones. "Tired?" Nathan asked quietly. "A little," Delilah admitted. "But happy. Very happy." "Good," Nathan said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "That is all I want for you, Delilah. Happiness and safety and the freedom to be exactly who you are." When they reached the ranch, Nathan lifted her down from the wagon with careful hands, holding her just a moment longer than necessary. The house was lit with welcoming lamplight, and someone, probably Henry the cook, had left a tray with cold supper and wine waiting for them. Nathan showed her to the master bedroom, which had been cleaned and prepared. He paused at the threshold, suddenly uncertain in a way she had not seen from him before. "If you need time," he said quietly. "If tonight is too soon, I will understand. We can wait until you are comfortable." Delilah felt a rush of affection for this man who, even now, was thinking of her comfort over his own desires. She reached up and cupped his face in her hands, feeling the rasp of his evening beard against her palms. "I am your wife," she said softly, "and I want to be your wife in every way. I am nervous, but I am not afraid, not with you." Nathan's eyes darkened with emotion and desire. He pulled her close, his kiss deeper now, no longer constrained by propriety or audience. Delilah responded with her own hunger, with the passion that had been building between them since that first meeting by the creek. They came together with tenderness and intensity, learning each other in the lamplight, building the physical foundation of their partnership with the same honesty that had characterized everything else between them. Later, lying in the circle of Nathan's arms with her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, Delilah felt a profound sense of rightness. This was where she belonged, with this man who valued her voice and her mind as much as her body, who wanted her strength rather than her submission. "I love you," Nathan murmured into her hair. "I know we have not said it yet, but I do. I think I have since that first conversation by the creek, when you challenged me and tested me and did not back down." "I love you too," Delilah replied, the words coming easily because they were true. "You gave me hope when I thought I had none left. You saw value in everything that made me unsuitable to everyone else. How could I not love you?" They drifted into sleep tangled together, and Delilah's last thought before darkness claimed her was that she had finally found home. The months that followed were a time of adjustment and growth. Delilah threw herself into learning the ranch, into understanding every aspect of the operation. She took over the account books completely, implementing her organizational system and finding ways to improve efficiency and profitability. Nathan was delighted with her contributions, frequently seeking her opinion on decisions and genuinely considering her input. They had their first real argument about 2 months after the wedding, when Nathan decided to buy additional cattle without consulting her first. Delilah was furious that he had made such a significant financial decision alone, seeing it as a violation of the partnership they had promised each other. "You said we would make decisions together," she said, her voice sharp with hurt and anger. "But you went ahead and committed a substantial amount of our capital without even mentioning it to me." Nathan's jaw tightened, his own temper rising. "I am still the one who runs this ranch, Delilah. I appreciate your help with the books, but I know cattle and I know when an opportunity is too good to pass up. And I know numbers," Delilah shot back. "And I know that this purchase, while potentially profitable, puts us at risk if we have any unexpected expenses in the next 6 months. Did you consider that? Or did you just assume that because you know cattle, you know everything?" They stood glaring at each other in the office, tension crackling between them. Then Nathan took a deep breath and deliberately sat down, gesturing for Delilah to do the same. "All right," he said, his voice still tight but controlled. "Explain it to me. Show me what I am missing." Delilah, surprised by his willingness to listen even in the heat of anger, sat down and pulled out the account books. She walked him through the numbers, showing him exactly where their reserves stood and what expenses were coming up. She laid out scenarios, showing what would happen if they had a harsh winter, if illness struck the herd, if any of a dozen potential problems arose. Nathan listened with a deepening frown, and when she finished, he rubbed his face with both hands. "You are right," he said finally. "I saw the opportunity and jumped without thinking through all the implications. I should have waited and discussed it with you first." "Yes, you should have," Delilah said, her anger cooling now that he was actually hearing her. "But more than that, you should have trusted that I would understand the opportunity and help you figure out if we could make it work. Leaving me out of the decision suggests you do not actually value my input despite what you have said." Nathan looked stricken. "That is not true. I do value your input, Delilah. I value it tremendously. I think I just fell into old habits, acting like I was still alone and only had myself to consider. I am sorry, truly." "Can you cancel the purchase?" Delilah asked. "Probably, though it would cost me some credibility with the seller," Nathan admitted. Delilah studied the numbers again, working through possibilities. "What if we took only half the number you agreed to? That would give us more cushion while still taking advantage of the opportunity. And we could agree to purchase the rest in 6 months if our position is stronger then." Nathan's face brightened. "That could work. Mitchell would probably agree to that, especially if I explain that I need to discuss it with my wife first." He reached across the desk and took her hand. "I am sorry, Delilah. You are right that I violated our agreement. It will not happen again. I promise to discuss major decisions with you before acting on them. And I promise to trust that when you are excited about something, it is probably for good reason," Delilah replied. "But we need to work through it together, Nathan. That is what partnership means." "Agreed," Nathan said, squeezing her hand. "Is it strange that I find you incredibly attractive when you are showing me where I went wrong with numbers?" Delilah laughed despite herself. "A little strange, yes, but I will take it." They renegotiated the cattle purchase together, presenting a united front to the seller and explaining the modified terms. Mitchell, the seller, was impressed rather than offended, commenting that Nathan was lucky to have a wife with a head for business. The compromise worked out well, allowing them to strengthen their herd while maintaining financial stability. As fall turned to winter and winter to spring, their partnership deepened and strengthened. They continued to have disagreements, some heated, but they worked through them with respect and honesty. Delilah discovered that Nathan was as good as his word about listening to her input, even when it contradicted his initial instincts. And Nathan found that having a true partner made the burden of running the ranch much lighter, that sharing decisions meant sharing responsibility and stress. They developed rhythms and routines, times when they worked side by side and times when they each focused on their separate areas of expertise. Delilah took on more of the business side of the ranch, corresponding with buyers, managing supplies, and keeping detailed records. Nathan handled the physical work and the management of the herd and the hands, but they consulted each other constantly, valuing the different perspectives they brought to problems. Delilah also began to understand the isolation that could come with ranch life. The nearest neighbors were miles away, and trips to town were infrequent. But she found satisfaction in the work and in her relationship with Nathan. They talked for hours in the evenings, sharing thoughts and ideas, discussing books Delilah ordered from San Francisco, debating politics and philosophy and practical matters of ranch management. In the spring, a year after their first meeting, Delilah realized she was pregnant. She told Nathan one evening after supper, watching his face carefully for his reaction. His joy was immediate and unrestrained, sweeping her up into his arms with a whoop of delight that brought the ranch hands running to see what had happened. "We are going to have a baby," Nathan announced to the assembled men, his grin so wide it looked painful. The hands offered congratulations and teasing in equal measure, and Henry the cook immediately began planning what foods would be best for a pregnant woman. Charlie pulled Delilah aside later, his eyes suspiciously bright. "Your mother would be proud," he said quietly. "And Nathan's mother too. You are building something good here, something that will last." The pregnancy was not easy. Delilah suffered from sickness in the early months and fatigue throughout. But Nathan was attentive and patient, taking on extra work without complaint and making sure she rested when she needed to. He brought her books from town, rubbed her swollen feet, and talked to her belly about ranch business, insisting that their child should be well informed from the start. "What if it is a girl?" Delilah asked one evening as Nathan told their unborn child about different cattle breeds. "Will you still want her to know about ranch management, especially if it is a girl?" Nathan said firmly. "Our daughter will grow up knowing she can do anything, be anything. She will learn numbers and cattle and horses, and if she wants to go to university, we will find a way to make it happen. The same goes if we have sons. Every child of ours will have every opportunity we can provide." Delilah felt tears prick her eyes, hormones making her more emotional than usual. "You are going to be such a good father." "I hope so," Nathan said, his hand resting gently on her rounded belly. "I want to do better than my father did, to build a family where everyone has a voice and no one is afraid to speak the truth." Their son was born on a cold October evening, arriving early and in a hurry after a labor that lasted only 6 hours. Nathan stayed with Delilah throughout, holding her hand and supporting her back, murmuring encouragement even when she cursed him for getting her pregnant in the first place. The midwife from town had been staying with them for a week in anticipation, and she managed the birth with calm efficiency. When their son let out his first indignant wail, Delilah felt a love so fierce it stole her breath. Nathan cut the cord with shaking hands, his face wet with tears as the midwife placed the baby on Delilah's chest. He was perfect, tiny and red-faced and absolutely perfect. "What should we name him?" Nathan asked, his finger tracing the soft curve of their son's cheek. "Daniel," Delilah said, thinking of her father. "Daniel Nathan Hawthorne, if you agree." "Daniel," Nathan repeated, testing the name. "I like it. Welcome to the world, Daniel. You have quite an extraordinary mother." The early months of parenthood were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Daniel was a demanding baby, wanting to nurse constantly and sleeping in short bursts. But he was also healthy and alert, his eyes tracking movement almost from the start. Nathan was a devoted father, taking his son on walks around the ranch, narrating everything they saw. The ranch hands were equally smitten, vying for the chance to hold the baby and offering unsolicited advice about child rearing. Delilah discovered a fierce protectiveness she had not known she possessed, along with a new understanding of her own mother and the sacrifices she must have made. She also discovered that it was possible to love Nathan even more than she already did, watching him with their son, seeing the gentleness and patience he brought to fatherhood. As Daniel grew from infant to baby to active toddler, the ranch continued to prosper. Delilah's organizational systems paid dividends, and Nathan's skill with cattle kept the herd healthy and productive. They expanded gradually and carefully, taking on 2 more hands and acquiring additional grazing land. The partnership they had built extended to parenting, with both of them sharing the work and joy of raising their son. Daniel inherited his mother's curiosity and his father's stubborn determination, a combination that kept them constantly on their toes. He asked endless questions, wanted to understand how everything worked, and had strong opinions about what he did and did not want to do. Nathan and Delilah encouraged his curiosity while setting firm boundaries about safety and respect. "He is exhausting," Delilah said one evening after finally getting Daniel to sleep. He was 3 years old and had recently discovered the word why, which he deployed with devastating frequency. "He is amazing," Nathan replied, though he looked equally tired, "and he is going to keep us honest. There is no hiding anything from him. He notices everything." "I wonder where he gets that," Delilah said with a smile, thinking of her own tendency to observe and question. When Daniel was 4, Delilah became pregnant again. This pregnancy was easier than the first, perhaps because she knew what to expect, or perhaps just because each pregnancy was different. Nathan was again attentive and supportive, though now he also had to manage an energetic preschooler who had opinions about everything, including the impending arrival of a sibling. "Will the baby be able to ride horses?" Daniel asked seriously. "Because if not, I do not see the point." "Eventually," Delilah assured him, "but first the baby will be very small and will need lots of care and attention." "Will you still have time for me?" Daniel asked, his big gray eyes so like his father's, showing vulnerability beneath the bravado. "Always," Delilah promised, pulling him into her lap despite her growing belly. "We will always have time for you, Daniel. Having another baby does not mean we love you any less. Our hearts just get bigger to hold all the love." Their daughter arrived in the spring, a beautiful May morning when the hills were green and wildflowers carpeted the meadows. The labor was longer this time and more difficult, but Nathan stayed with Delilah throughout, just as he had with Daniel. When their daughter finally arrived, smaller and more delicate than her brother had been, Delilah felt that same overwhelming rush of love. "Sarah," Delilah said, looking down at her daughter's tiny face. "After your mother, if you agree." Nathan's eyes filled with tears. "Sarah Delilah Hawthorne." "My mother would be honored. Thank you." Sarah was a different baby than Daniel had been, more content and easier to soothe. But she was also fiercely observant, her eyes tracking everything around her with intense focus. As she grew, it became clear that she had inherited her mother's intelligence and determination along with her father's calm steadiness. Daniel was initially skeptical of his sister, but quickly became devoted to her, appointing himself her protector and teacher. He showed her everything around the ranch, explained how things worked in his 4-year-old way, and got indignant if anyone suggested she could not do something because she was a girl. "Mother can do anything," he would say with absolute conviction. "So Sarah can too." The years rolled on, marked by the changing seasons and the growth of their children. Daniel started learning his letters and numbers from Delilah, showing the same quick mind she possessed. Sarah followed her brother everywhere, demanding to be included in everything he did. The ranch continued to thrive, becoming one of the most respected operations in the region. Nathan and Delilah's partnership only strengthened with time. They still argued occasionally, still had moments of friction when their strong personalities clashed. But they had learned how to fight fair, how to listen even when they disagreed, how to compromise without resentment. They made decisions together, celebrated successes together, and supported each other through challenges. When Daniel was 10 and Sarah was 6, they faced one of their biggest challenges. A drought struck the region, withering the grass and drying up seasonal creeks. Water became scarce and feed prices skyrocketed. Many ranchers were forced to sell off their herds at a loss, unable to sustain their operations. Nathan and Delilah sat up late into the night, working through their options. The account books that Delilah had maintained so carefully showed that they had reserves, but not enough to weather a prolonged drought without making hard choices. "We could sell off part of the herd," Nathan said, his face haggard with worry. "Take the loss now and hope we can rebuild when the drought breaks. Or we could buy access to water from the properties that have reliable wells," Delilah countered, running calculations. "It would be expensive, and we would be taking a risk that the drought does not last more than one more season. But if we are right, we would be in a strong position when things recover." They debated long into the night, weighing risks and possibilities. Finally, they decided to take the risk, to pay for water access and hold onto their herd. It meant cutting expenses everywhere else, meant tightening their belts and making do with less. But it also meant betting on their partnership, on the business they had built together. The drought lasted one more brutal year before the rains finally returned. By then, they had used up most of their reserves and taken on some debt. But they still had their herd, and when the market recovered, they were positioned to take advantage of it while others were still trying to rebuild. "We did it," Nathan said one evening, looking over the account books that finally showed them moving back into the black. "We survived." "We did it together," Delilah corrected. "Neither of us could have done it alone." "No," Nathan agreed, pulling her close. "Together is the only way that works." As their children grew older, Nathan and Delilah made good on their promises about education and opportunity. Daniel showed an aptitude for working with horses, training them with patience and insight. But he also loved reading and learning, and they encouraged both interests. Sarah was fearless and curious, wanting to understand everything about the ranch and the world beyond it. They treated both children as capable individuals, giving them responsibilities and trusting them to meet those responsibilities. When Daniel was 16 and Sarah was 12, a woman arrived at the ranch asking for work. She was young, probably not yet 20, and desperate. She had run away from an arranged marriage to a man who had been violent with his previous wife, and she needed a place to stay and a way to support herself. Nathan and Delilah looked at each other, a whole conversation passing between them in a glance. They both knew what it was like to be desperate, to need someone to take a chance on you. And they both knew that ranch work was not limited by gender, that capability mattered more than convention. "Can you cook?" Delilah asked. Henry had retired the previous year, and they had been making do with their own cooking and help from the hands. "Yes, madam," the woman said, "and I can work stock if you need. I grew up on a farm and know my way around animals." "Then you are hired," Nathan said. "We will provide room and board plus wages. In return, we expect honest work and straight dealing. If you have trouble with anyone on this ranch, you come to me or my wife immediately. Understood?" "Yes, sir," the woman said, tears of relief streaming down her face. Thank you so much." Her name was Emma, and she fit into the ranch operation seamlessly. She was a good cook and a hard worker, and she quickly became part of their extended family. Delilah watched Nathan make that decision, saw the way he did not hesitate to offer help to someone in need, and felt her love for him deepen even further. "You are a good man," she told him that night as they prepared for bed. "I just did what was right," Nathan replied. "What we both knew was right. Besides, you would have hired her even if I had hesitated." "True," Delilah admitted with a smile, "but I am glad I did not have to argue you into it." The years continued to pass, bringing new challenges and new joys. Daniel grew into a capable young man, skilled with horses and cattle, but also thoughtful and well-read. He went away to agricultural college for 2 years, learning new techniques and approaches, then returned to the ranch eager to implement what he had learned. Nathan welcomed his input, and the two of them worked together to continue improving the operation. Sarah proved to have a gift for numbers even greater than her mother's. She took over the account books when she was 16, finding new ways to analyze data and identify patterns. She also developed a passion for justice, often arguing with her parents about workers' rights and the treatment of Chinese immigrants and other marginalized groups. "She reminds me of you," Nathan told Delilah one evening after a particularly spirited debate about voting rights for women. "Passionate and unwilling to accept injustice." "She reminds me of both of us," Delilah replied, "stubborn enough to argue for what she believes in and smart enough to make compelling arguments." "We raised them well," Nathan said with satisfaction. "We did," Delilah agreed. When Delilah turned 45, Nathan organized a party to celebrate, inviting everyone who had been part of their lives over the years. Mrs. Weatherby came from Murphy's, now quite elderly but still sharp as ever. The ranch hands, some old and some new, gathered to honor the woman who had treated them with respect and fairness. Daniel brought his new wife, a schoolteacher he had met in town, and courted with the same thoughtful persistence his father had shown. Sarah brought her opinions and her laughter, filling the house with energy. As Delilah looked around at the gathering, at the life she and Nathan had built together, she felt profound gratitude. She thought back to that desperate young woman being returned for the 4th time, convinced she would never find a place where she belonged. She thought about Nathan's letter to Mrs. Weatherby, about his courage in asking for what he truly needed rather than what convention dictated. "What are you thinking?" Nathan asked, coming to stand beside her on the porch where she had escaped for a moment of quiet. "That I am extraordinarily lucky," Delilah replied. "That we found each other against all odds and that we built something real and lasting." "Not luck," Nathan said, pulling her close. "Choice. We chose each other and we chose every day after that to keep choosing each other. That is what made the difference." "You are right," Delilah said, leaning into his embrace. "And I would choose you again every single time." "Even when I am being stubborn and wrong?" Nathan asked with a smile. "Especially then," Delilah replied, "because you are stubborn and wrong so rarely it makes it easier when you are." Nathan laughed, the sound rich and full. 23 years married and you still know how to wound my pride." 23 years married and you still ask me to," Delilah countered. They stood together watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. The ranch spread out before them, thriving and peaceful. Inside, their children and friends celebrated, their laughter carrying on the evening air. This was the life they had built together, founded on honesty and partnership, sustained by love and respect. "I need to tell you something," Nathan said quietly. "Something I have never properly said." "What is that?" Delilah asked, turning to look at him. "That day by the creek when we first met, you terrified me," Nathan admitted. "You were so fierce, so uncompromising in your honesty. I was scared I could not live up to what I had promised, that I would disappoint you or fail you. But I knew even then that you were worth facing that fear, that if I could build a life with you, it would be a life worth living." "You did not fail me," Delilah said, her throat tight with emotion. "Not once in all these years." You have been exactly what you promised to be, honest, fair, and willing to hear truth even when it was uncomfortable. You gave me a partnership when everyone else wanted to give me a cage. And you gave me purpose, Nathan replied. You made me better than I would have been alone. You challenged me and supported me and loved me even when I did not deserve it. Everything good in my life, everything I am proud of, exists because of you. They kissed as the last light faded from the sky. Two people who had found each other across the impossible distance of broken expectations and desperate hope. They had built a life on the foundation of a simple truth. That real partnership required two voices, two minds, two hearts working together in honesty and love. As the years continued to pass, as Daniel took on more of the ranch management and Sarah left for university to study law, as grandchildren arrived to fill the house with noise and joy, Nathan and Delilah remained each other's partners and greatest champions. They grew old together, their hair turning gray, their faces marking the passage of time with lines and weathering. But their partnership never wavered. They still debated and argued, still challenged each other and pushed each other to be better. They still sat up late talking about ideas and dreams, still found new ways to surprise and delight each other. And through it all, they maintained the honesty that had brought them together, the willingness to speak truth even when it was difficult. On their 50th wedding anniversary, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren, with the ranch still thriving under their guidance and Daniel's capable management, Nathan stood to make a toast. His hair was white now, his face deeply lined, but his gray eyes were as clear and sharp as ever. 50 years ago, he said, his voice still strong, I wrote a letter to a matchmaker asking for something most people thought was foolish. I asked for a woman who would speak truth to me, who would tell me when I was wrong, who would be my partner in every sense of the word. What I got was Delilah Kimball, who exceeded every hope I had and became the foundation of everything good in my life. He turned to look at Delilah, his expression tender. You were returned for talking back too much, for being too intelligent, too passionate, too unwilling to accept injustice in silence. And I thank God every day for those men's foolishness, because it meant you were still available when I finally had the sense to look for what I truly needed. I needed someone who speaks truth, and you have given me that truth every day for 50 years. Here is to 50 more, my love, my partner, my best friend. Delilah rose, her own hair white, her own face marked by time but still beautiful in Nathan's eyes. She took his hand, feeling the familiar calluses, the strength that age had not diminished. You took a risk on a woman everyone else had rejected, she said, her voice thick with emotion. You saw value where others saw only problems. You gave me a place to belong and a purpose to fulfill. You gave me love and respect and partnership. Everything I am, everything I have accomplished exists because you had the courage to ask for what you needed and the wisdom to recognize it when you found it. She raised her glass. To 50 years of partnership, of truth-telling, of love that has only grown deeper with time. To the man who said he needed someone who speaks truth and then actually meant it. To my husband, my partner, my greatest love. As the family cheered and toasted, as the celebration continued around them, Nathan and Delilah stood together as they had stood together for 50 years. Side by side, equals in partnership, bound by love and sustained by truth. It had not always been easy, had not always been simple, but it had always been worth it. That night, after the guests had gone and the house had quieted, they sat together on the porch where they had sat so many times before. The stars wheeled overhead, eternal and unchanging, while below them the ranch settled into sleep. "You ever regret it?" Delilah asked quietly. choosing someone difficult instead of someone easy. Nathan pulled her closer, his arm solid around her shoulders. Never, not for a single moment. Easy would have been boring. Easy would have been settling. You have given me a life of passion and purpose and genuine partnership. Why would I ever regret that? Because I still argue with you, Delilah said with a soft laugh. I still tell you when you are wrong, still push back when I disagree. And I still love you for it, Nathan replied. Just as I loved you for it on that first day by the creek. You are who I needed, Delilah, then and now and always. They sat in comfortable silence, two old people who had loved each other well, who had built something lasting out of honesty and respect. As the night deepened around them, Delilah thought about the journey that had brought her here, about the desperation and shame of being returned again and again, about the moment when Nathan had offered her something different. She thought about the life they had built together, the children they had raised to value truth and justice, the ranch they had turned into a thriving enterprise, the community they had helped build through fair dealing and honest work. She thought about 50 years of partnership, of being heard and valued, of having her voice matter. I love you, she said simply, more than words can express. I love you too, Nathan replied, my truth teller, my partner, my home. And as the stars wheeled overhead and the night settled around them, Nathan and Delilah Hawthorne sat together in the peace they had earned, in the love they had built, in the partnership that had sustained them through 50 years and would sustain them through whatever time remained. They had been brave enough to choose each other, wise enough to choose each other again every day after, and their reward was a life lived fully, honestly, and together. The story that had begun with rejection and desperation, with a woman deemed unsuitable and a man brave enough to ask for what he truly needed, had become a testament to the power of partnership, to the strength found in honesty, and to the enduring nature of love built on respect and truth. It was a story worth telling, worth remembering, worth celebrating for all the years to come.